Hello students, I welcome you all to lecture number 3, unit number 2 of chapter Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. This is the chapter of class 10 CBSE book First Flight. This is chapter number 2. So students, this is unit number 2. I told you in the last lecture that this chapter has been divided into 3 units for your convenience, so that I can explain it better and you can understand it well. So students, here Nelson Mandela Long Walk to Freedom, this chapter has been written by Mandela himself, and this chapter is just an extract taken from his autobiography that is entitled as Long Walk to Freedom. So students, in this lecture number 3, we are going to discuss paragraph that begins with a few moments later, and you can spot it on page number 19. Then up to page number 21, the last line that ends with hidden but never extinguished. When I explain this to you, I want all of you to open your books in front of you. So students, we will take a recapitulation now. So students, Nelson Mandela was born in 1918. It was the first decade of the 19th century, and the political and social conditions in South Africa were not favorable for the blacks of South Africa. Actually, they were discriminated based on the skin of their color, and they were not given equal rights. In this chapter, we are going to read the experience of Nelson Mandela and the people like him. How did many of great men from South Africa sacrifice their lives, and after a long struggle, they achieved their freedom. They got their freedom. It was on 10 May 1994 that Nelson Mandela was elected to be the first black president of South Africa. And with his appointment as the president of South Africa, the world's most harsh system, that is known as apartheid, was abolished. So students, I have now again given you a brief introduction to the chapter. Here, let us take a recapitulation of the unit number 1 and the lecture number 2. In the beginning of the chapter, we came to know that Mandela talks about the inauguration ceremony. He first tells us about 10th May 1994. He tells where the inauguration ceremony was held, how he was received by the people, by the world leaders, by the dignitaries. He also thanked the international leaders. He tells that his daughter Janani was with him on the day of inauguration ceremony. So these were the things that we came to know, that we learnt in chapter Nelson Mandela, unit 1. So here class, students, we are going to discuss now this unit number 2. So I hope you all have opened your books. So I am ready to explain these points to you. Let me just make these points clear to you once again. On page number 19, we will begin from page number 19 and we will end at page number 21 in this. So students, in this unit we are going to discuss these 10 points. Actually, I have extracted these 10 points out of the content that we are going to read today. The first point is military's loyalty to democracy. How does actually the military, the highest generals of the South African forces, show their loyalty to Nelson Mandela as well as to the installation of the new government? Then there is the third point, the 2 national anthems. On the day of inauguration, 2 national anthems were sung both by the people of by the black people of South Africa as well as the white. Fourth point is first decade of the 19th century. Here Nelson Mandela tells us about the first decade of 19th century. Here he means to say what was the situation, what was the condition in South Africa during the first decade of the 19th century. Then last decade of 19th century means he's just making a comparison between the first decade and the last decade of the 19th century. We'll read it about it more. Some of African patriots. Nelson Mandela calls himself to be the sum of all the African patriots who have gone before him. Means in this whole struggle for freedom, there were many people who fought for the rights of the people of South Africa, especially the black people of South Africa. So Nelson Mandela calls himself to be the sum of all those people. He says that this is because of all those people who sacrificed their lives for this cause. And what is the cause? The cause is the freedom. Freedom from the bondage of discrimination or the racial domination. Racial here means concerning the color of the skin, regarding the color of the skin. So he also names few freedom fighters. I have written only two. There are other names written in your textbook. Then the point number 7 is effect of oppression. We will come to know what Mandela thinks about the effects of oppression. When somebody is treated badly, what actually happens to his or her character. Then there is point number 8, meaning of courage. Mandela learns a new thing here. He draws conclusions based on the extreme torture that he suffered during this struggle for freedom. So how does he understand courage? Point number 9, his ideas about love, hate, and man's goodness. Nelson Mandela here tells in his autobiography that love and hate are two aspects of human life. He believes that people are not born to hate others. He says that it is love that comes more naturally to human heart. He says that if people hate somebody, they are taught to hate. They do not learn. They are not born to hate others. Means they are taught to hate. Nobody is born to hate. Mandela here draws the conclusion that if somebody is taught to hate, the people can be taught to love as well. He believes that love comes more naturally than hatred, the human heart. So all these 10 points we are going to discuss in this unit. Again, I want you all to open your books and read, because I have written these points in a sequential order. So students, let us move on to the explanation of first point. So students, in the first point, military's loyalty to democracy. In the very first point, military's loyalty to democracy, Mandela tells how the military and the police force showed their loyalty to democracy. Mandela recalls that the African jet fighters, troop carriers, rode in perfect formation over the Union buildings. Then Mandela says that it was not just the display of pinpoint precision. Pinpoint precision here means that it was not just a display, or it was not just anything, something like show off. It was nothing for show off. It was actually the way that the highest generals of South African defense and police force showed their loyalty to the newly formed government, or the newly formed government that is based on the structure of democracy. It is then Nelson Mandela recalls that he and the people like him were always considered as outcasts. Outcasts means that they were separated from the mainstream culture. They were not given equal rights. They were not considered as equals with the white-skinned people. So Nelson Mandela, he recalls that he himself was considered as outlaw. Even the military, the highest generals of South African defense, saluted him. Again, class, he also recalls that it was not so long ago that they would not have saluted him but arrested him. So the people, especially the military forces, the police force, the people, the highest generals, they did not salute him, they arrested him. These people are now saluting him on this historical day, the day of the inauguration. So this shows that the people were also showing their loyalty to Nelson Mandela, who was elected to be the first black president. So class, here we have come to know that how did the highest generals of the South African forces and the police force showed their loyalty to democracy and to Mandela. They showed their loyalty to Mandela by saluting him. And in this section, Mandela also recalls that not so long ago, these were the people who did not salute him but arrested him. Now, the point number 3, 2 national anthems. So on this historical day, 2 national anthems were sung by the black people of South Africa as well as the white people of South Africa. Mandela tells that the white-skinned people of South Africa sang Nkosi Sikelel Afrika. This is the name of the national anthem. Then the black people of South Africa sang Daisten. What does this singing of 2 national anthems on this historical day signify? This is the question. What does it signify? It signifies that both the black people of South Africa as well as the white-skinned people of South Africa were now considered as equals and they were under the same roof. That is the newly formed government based on the structure of democracy. So this symbolizes equality. They were given the equal rights as well as they were given the freedom to choose their own culture. So class, this is the first decade of 19th century. This is the most important part of this chapter. In this chapter we'll come to know about Anglo-Boer War. Anglo-Boer War, this is a term written in your textbook. So Anglo means English, Boer means the people of South Africa, Africans. So there was a war between the Englishmen as well as the Africans, the British Empire and the African people. African people, that's right. So, due to this Anglo-Boer War, which took place before a few years after the 19th century, so the white-skinned people of South Africa patched up the differences. This is the line written in your textbook. The white-skinned people of South Africa patched up their differences. Patched up here means settled their disputes or settled their differences with the white-skinned people of South Africa. And what was the outcome of this settlement? The outcome of this settlement was that they created the world's most cruel system. The world's most cruel system was the policy of apartheid. They created the world's harshest system. That was the policy of apartheid, and this policy of apartheid meant to separate the people, especially the blacks, from the whites. So he says that few years after the Anglo-Boer War and just few years before his own birth, he was born on 1918. So when Mandela mentions this, he is simply referring to the policy of apartheid. He's referring to the policy of apartheid that created a deep and lasting wound in the hearts of the people of South Africa, especially the black people of South Africa. Students, it is in the first decade of the 19th century that the conditions were very unfavorable. When Mandela compares the first decade with the last decade, and then he again comes to the fact that it is in the 19th century, especially the last decade of the 19th century, the conditions are quite different. How are the conditions different? In the last decade of the 19th century, Mandela and his people were able to achieve their political emancipation. They were able to settle, they were able to establish a government that is meant to secure equal rights for all the people of South Africa, whether they are whites or they are non-whites. So it is in the last decade of the 19th century that it is in 1994 that the first democratic elections were held in South Africa, and Nelson Mandela won 252 votes out of 400. Thus, he laid the foundations for democracy, for the first non-racial and democratic government. With this installation of the government, the policy of apartheid was abolished. So this is just a slight comparison that is given in the first decade of the 19th century and the last decade of the 19th century. So first decade of the 19th century is contrasted from this last decade of the 19th century. The conditions are quite different. So students, I hope that this point is clear to you, point number 4 and point number 5. Now let us move on to point number 6, sum of all African patriots. Students, here Nelson Mandela calls himself to be the sum of all African patriots. All African patriots, as we know that this was a fight against racial domination. This was a fight to obtain one's freedom, and the black people of South Africa wanted to get their freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from racial domination. Freedom from poverty, freedom from deprivation and any kind of discrimination. So Nelson Mandela names few people. Here I have written 2 names only. In your textbook there are many, not many, there are few names given. So Oliver Tambo's and Yusuf Daddo's, Walter Sisulu's, and a few others are there. So students, as we know that even in India, for our struggle for freedom, there were many men who were known as the freedom fighters. So whenever there is a struggle for freedom or for any kind of right, there are many people who come up and face the situations, and they suffer extreme brutalities, they suffer a lot, and sometimes it happens that they're not alive to see what they have achieved. But there are many other people who are alive to see the changes which have been brought about due to the sacrifices of many freedom fighters who were fighting to make something possible. So especially here in this chapter we come to know that these people are not alive today. Because of their unimaginable sacrifices, Nelson Mandela is what he is today. And what is Nelson Mandela today? He has become the first black president of South Africa. So Nelson Mandela says that it is because of the sacrifices of these people that he has been elected as the first black president of South Africa. And with his election as a president, he has abolished, he has done away with the policy of apartheid. So Why does Nelson Mandela calls himself? Why does Nelson Mandela call himself to be the sum of all those African patriots? Because it is because of the sacrifices of all these people that Nelson Mandela and the people like him have got their freedom, and there is no such a system as racial domination which can torture them, which can rip them apart, or which can bother them, which can trouble them. So students, we are moving on to the point number 7, effect of oppression. The word oppression means the brutality, the bad treatment, ill treatment that is given to someone. Especially when somebody is tortured to the extreme heights, when somebody is beaten up, when somebody is mentally tortured, this is called oppression. So what is the effect of oppression? Suppose when somebody is tortured badly, when somebody is beaten up, when somebody is prevented from doing something that is very important for his survival, that is very important for his existence, means when a person is fighting for his rights and the opposite forces try to impose that person by force, try to stop that person by force, this is called oppression. So what happens when somebody is consistently tortured? What happens? The character of that person becomes very strong. So the same thing happened in the chapter. The effect of this oppression was that this policy of apartheid created among the black people of South Africa the man of extraordinary courage. Men of extraordinary courage were the people like Oliver Tambo's, Yusuf Daddo's. Mandela says that their likes can never be seen again in future. Their likes can never be known in the world. Their likes means the people like them. So students, in point number 8, we come to know how does Mandela's thinking about courage change. Mandela says that it is from these comrades that he has learned the meaning of courage. What is courage? Mandela says that courage does not mean that a person is not afraid of something. Courage means that a person has conquered the fear. Means courage does not mean the absence of fear. Courage means that somebody has overcome the fear. When you overcome the fear, that simply means you have courage, means you do not fear. So in order to be fearless, you should have courage. Simply, Mandela wants to say this. So what is the meaning of courage to Mandela? Mandela says that the courage does not mean the absence of fear, but a triumph over it. Triumph, T-R-I-U-M-P-H. Triumph means victory over it. Means when you get the better of your fear, that means you are courageous. Right? If I say that I am fearless, so I'm not courageous. I am courageous only when I overcome the fear I have. When I have won over the fear I have, I become courageous, or I have courage. So here Mandela says that he has learned the meaning of courage from these comrades. Comrades, C-O-M-R-A-D-E-S. Comrades means from these friends, from these people. So students, we are moving to point number 9 now. This is his ideas about love and hate. Students, Mandela's ideas about love and hate change over time. Over time means after this whole experience, he has a new understanding of love and hate. Mandela says that no one is born to hate other people. It is while living in the world that we learn to love or hate. Still, he believes that love is something that comes more naturally to human heart than the other, than its counterpart. Counterpart means than its other part. What is it? What is its other part? Its other part is hatred, hate. So Mandela says that if people can be taught to hate, they can be taught to love as well. 10 point, men's goodness. Mandela, in the last section of unit number 2, recalls that once he was behind the bars and there was a guard. He says that he saw a glimmer in the eyes of the guard, glimmer of humanity, glimmer of sympathy. The guard was also feeling bad about those black people, especially Nelson Mandela, who was confined within the bars, confined within the jail. So Nelson Mandela says when he noticed this spark of humanity in the eyes of that guard, the guard who is standing at the door of the jail to protect or to keep a watch on the prisoners. So Nelson Mandela says that man's goodness is a flame. It is hidden. It is hidden for some time, but it can never be extinguished. Means Nelson Mandela wants to say that in all of the human beings there is a glimmer, there is a spark of goodness, there is a spark of humanity. And when the time comes, this spark of man's goodness, spark of humanity becomes visible. Today in this unit number 2, lecture number 3, we have discussed the paragraph which begins at page number 19 and ends at page number 21. I have tried my level best to explain each and everything to you in this section. Still, if you find any problem regarding anything, you can write in the comment box. The word meanings are given along with the text. Learn the word meanings and try to work with them. So students, at last I want to give you a message. I want to give you a good piece of advice. The advice is that we are learning English. We are reading this chapter not only to know the story, we are supposed to know the language. And we can be familiar with the language when we read the text. We try to understand the words and the meanings that they convey. The chapter ends here. Thank you.